Aujourd'hui, je vais parler de something that you clearly admire, okay? And that is this incredibly stupid, new, but not really new, fad of BNPL, or Buy Now, Pay Later. Hey, XenPuck here. Another day finding yet another terrifying way for people to waste their hard-earned money. Yep, I'll make it clear right now that I'm against BNPL. Okay, despite the fact that, ironically, I personally would probably be an ideal candidate to take advantage of such a scheme, because I'm organized and disciplined about where every dollar of mine goes. But that's not most people, is it? So let me just first go over what it is, right? This is really pretty simple stuff. It's a different option at the checkout line, online usually these days, right? So if these new BNPL type of companies are available at whatever retailer you're buying from, you can then choose to simply pay the same price, but over a duration of time and a predefined amount of installment payments, right? At no extra charge whatsoever, as long as you pay on time, of course. Typical setup would be something like 4 payments over 6 weeks, right? You can look at it as an alternative to using credit cards, though I'll get to this comparison later because I think in reality it's otherwise, right? I'll link some general information articles in the news about this new trend if you care to follow the more nitty-gritty. Now onto a quick analysis on some major issues with this type of spending, right? I'll be comparing it to its very close cousin, the credit card, and hopefully you'll see why soon enough, right? Number one, just to start, this idea of BNPL is not even new, okay? It's just paying in installments. Now, of course, the new companies that are being valued at billions as their startups are themselves new, right? But the companies like Klarna or Afterpay are simply taking an old idea and bringing it into the digital age. What's wrong with that, right? Well, nothing wrong with it per se, right? It's simply an old method wrapped in new cloth, right? The basic actual function, not new. Even your grandma has at some point put some items on layaway or installment plans, right? Sure, here's the thing, right? There is a slight difference. The difference with layaway plans and this BNPL is that even though you pay in installments, in layaway plans you get the item at the end, right? When you accumulate up enough money, you're essentially putting an item on hold. This buy now, pay later sounds better because you get the item right at the first installment, right? And you pay for it onwards later, right? After you already bring the item home. So it's really just deferred installments over time, right? What service that's much maligned already in society does that sound like? Isn't this just like a credit card, right? You get the item now and pay a bit or many bits later and later? Number two, so BNPL, when used by the consumer perfectly, as in you're paying for the item on time and in full, is totally fine. Similar, by the way, to if you paid your credit card balance off in full every month, right? Same thing. Usage of credit cards would be totally fine if you're using them exactly, because that means those companies are not making any money off of you, at least not, directly, right? The problem, of course, is what fees it has, what fees that BNPL would charge, right? And whether you are prone to be paying those things. So BNPL companies do charge their retail partners a fee, right? That's similar, actually, still to how credit card companies works, right? That's a transaction fee, essentially, a retailer fee. And while most BNPL companies try to stay away from interest payments, they do charge you late fees if you're ever late. And here's where the reality is should set in, right? The Forbes article that I've linked here quotes that 43% of users in the last 2 years have been paying late fees. So I think that just talks about the clientele of these BNPL companies, right? They're not people who can actually afford the product, right? This is why I said earlier, I'm actually the perfect candidate for this type of service, right? Because I would never be disorganized enough to miss a payment, nor would I not have the money to pay for it in installments. But here's the irony. While I could use this service essentially to delay paying for an item by like 2 months, I would never do that because I wouldn't buy any item that I didn't actually already have the cash for on hand immediately. The fundamental problem with this model is that it incentivizes people to buy things that they absolutely don't have the cash for at any given moment in time, right? Now, if you check out the other article, the CNBC article talking about, I think, why younger people are loving this BNPL fad, You'd see the example that they gave was literally some 21-year-old lady who wanted to pay for makeup that cost something like 144 bucks, and she needed BNPL to buy that. I read that and I was like, oh my god, seriously, it's WTF. If you don't have $150 to buy for an item, please do not buy any item that costs that much, right? That is not even a single paycheck level of savings. Like if you don't have that much, really if you don't have 2 or 3 times that much saved, don't buy items that cost that much, right? They're makeup that cost way less than 150 bucks. I'm sorry, I really just hate watching young people develop these habits that are completely antithetical to, getting to FIRE, getting to early retirement. And that's what BNPL does for you, okay? It normalizes even more that spending money you don't have is totally okay, even to the tune of $150. Okay, honestly, if you bought, let's say, one item at a time and kept a tight lid on it, paid your, 4 installments, you'll probably have an okay experience. But this is just a start, right? Look at anyone's spending pattern. Yours, your parents, your friends, anyone. Do you know anybody who only buys a single relatively nice item every 6 weeks? Really? What's much more likely to happen is that if you had one fine experience with BNPL, you'd just purchase more items next time, right? More items, and the heavier the burden is going to be, that's going to drag on, and eventually, at some point, this is what the company wants. So you make more purchases, so they'll get more money, and you will definitely be hit with some more fees in the long run, right? Again, this is more money for them. More purchase volume is more retail fees for them. And more late fees is more direct money that you're handing over to these BNPL companies. And the loser is only, well, you, the consumer, right? Because now you're in the habit of paying for stuff that you clearly do not have the fiscal discipline for. And honestly, once that mentality is set, you're primed to go down the poor usage of the credit card train, because at some point you'll be cut off from these BNPL services that are essentially simply giving you relatively tiny microloans in short periods, right? Now, how do you think you'll do in the big bad world of credit card usage when your first experience has already just normalized and incentivized you to buy more than you can actually afford? You see where I'm going with this, right? So BNPL is essentially a gateway drug to heavy credit card usage, and in the exact ways that you should not be using these services, okay? Point number 3. Finally, BNPL and installment plans for credit cards, the existing, type of services, right? Now, I want to mention this is the real shady part of BNPL companies, right? What's insidious about this type of new companies is that the only new part is, of course, they have your data, and it's this consumer data about who and what spends where. That's a real value proposition. That's why these companies are worth billions, right? Compare this to, let's say, any retailer who's willing to, give you a layaway plan or something like that, right? That's been doing this kind of stuff, 50 years ago, like Kmart's and the Sears back in the days. These stores that don't even exist anymore, right? Like the people that your grandma would have dealt with. Who would you prefer to know your spending patterns? Your local single retailer, or now through these BNPL companies, essentially anybody who has money to go buy this consumer information from one of these small startups, right? I put small in quotes because they're worth billions apparently, so they're not that small, right? Your privacy out the window, right? And a secondary effect is, since you're not going through a credit card company, right, like in the existing system, even if you make all the right payments, it doesn't even register for your credit scores. Your credit scores won't actually increase. So you still need to build up that score to help you on later in life with like a mortgage, for instance, right? However, should you actually mess up and default on payments, I will bet your ass that these startups will send you to collections, right? And so that, if you pay well, not going to help you in the future. If you pay poorly, you better believe you will be denied their service, if not more credit services from other vendors later on in your life again. So yeah. In conclusion, who should use BNPL? Well, absolutely no one. I've talked about how I think the don't ever use the credit card mantra of Dave Ramsey's teaching is very much for beginner. But here I'm going to add, if that's for beginner level, using BNPL would be even more infantilized, right? Using BNPL would be like using a crappier credit card that has no chance of rewarding you or building credit, whose sole purpose would be to make you, the consumer, more susceptible to other, more mature types of possibly predatory lending practices such as credit cards. As you know, I have nothing against credit cards personally, because I know they can both be wonderful tools and I use them all the time. But BNPL, oh Lord, it's just a worse version that currently preys on people who've heard that they shouldn't use credit cards, but most likely don't know why, and people who are definitely going to get into financial trouble if they start using this tool, okay? And really, just the young and the naive, that's who they're preying on, right? So, I mean, honestly, I don't know if I'm convincing enough to convince anyone, but let me repeat to you again the core motto of FIRE, right? Don't spend money that you don't have. You don't need all this crap. Think about all the silly infomercials on TV that talks about how everything's cheaper when you think about it in terms of just 4 payments of $99.99. Don't they all sound like scams? Because that's what they are, and so is BNPL, okay? It's just a fancier, more packaged up version of a late-night infomercial peddling the newest useless gadget that even the Home Shopping Network wouldn't touch. That's how much BS this is. Stay away, please, for your own financial health. Anyway, rant over, comment, share, like, and sub, or whatever you want, because I want you to be free. Okay, cheers, à la prochaine.